Hello and welcome to the program. This is Health Matters on Channels Television. We're so glad you could join us. I am Mary Alale Yusuf. Approximately 300,000 children are born every year with sickle cell disorder all over the world. In Nigeria, which has the highest burden, 2 out of every 100 children is born with the disorder. Advancements in medicine and care now enable children who couldn't see a 5th birthday to live as long as any other person while managing the disorder. There is currently only one known cure, which is bone marrow or stem cell transplantation. It involves replacing the abnormal stem cells residing in the bone marrow with healthy cells from an eligible donor. My guest on the show today is a consultant public health physician, National Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Sickle Cell Foundation Nigeria, Dr. Annette Akinshete. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you, Mary?
I'm doing great. It's
Excellent.
over a year since the Bone Marrow Transplant Center was launched, Luth and Sickle Cell Foundation. How do you pick your candidates?
Let's dial back a little. Yes, it's over a year since it was launched and was opened formally by the governor of Lagos State. And we're very excited. State-of-the-art facility. Our partners, our tech partners, the Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. And our center looks just like this. So now it's been launched. But let me tell you, Mary, what we have seen is that setting up or establishing a stem cell transplant center is not a stroll in the park at all to get going. And added to that, I don't think we reckoned with all the budget was done, but we didn't reckon with the vagaries of the Nigerian economy, all the downturn in our economy, and that affected a lot of our procedures and processes. Okay, now we're at the stage where we're ready to admit our patients. We have 5 isolation rooms where when the patients go in, once they've the marrow has been infused, nobody's allowed to go there except they're properly clad, including their parents. Okay, how do you select patients? That's a good question. But I tell you that the doctors who select patients are very, very careful, very selective. They have to check many boxes, including 1, how bad is the sickle cell? How bad is the sickle cell? Because not every patient is a good candidate for the procedure. The procedure has its drawbacks, has its complications. So it's not something that you just don't hear about bone marrow transplantation and think, oh, everybody can run in and get that procedure. As a public health physician, I still say that whilst it's important that we as Nigeria, being the country with the highest burden of sickle cell in the world, as much as it's important that we have it, it is important also, more important, I think, that the base of the pyramid of care is where our focus should really be. The basic care for persons with sickle cell. That is comprehensive care. Are they getting their routine medication every day? Folic acid, proguanil to prevent malaria, penicillin to prevent infection, immunizations to prevent infections. Because those are infections. You reeled out the statistics at the beginning. What kills our children is infections before the age of 5. So when you get them, early diagnosis and prompt treatment. You get them early. We're pushing for newborn screening, as you know. So if we have a robust national newborn screening program, we'll get them very early and we'll institute preventative programs and treatments that prevent them from getting infections that kill them before the age of 5. So that base is very important. And the newer drugs like hydroxyurea that prevents them getting crisis, that just generally modulates the disease so that they don't have the complications, as we're seeing as they're getting older, they're getting more and more complications, including organ damage, including, of course, the stroke affects younger children between 2 and 16, organ damage, renal failure, leg ulcers, name it. So those are the things that hydroxyurea has done a lot to help our patients with sickle cell. So in selecting patients, number one question that doctors will normally ask is how bad is this sickle cell? How many crises a year? So they check the boxes and determine, okay. And people also think that cost may be a problem. For us, cost is not an issue. It's expensive, mind you. And in America, it can be as much as $1 million. So for us, we pegged our cost at I can't even say the amount now because it just keeps rising with the way our naira is plummeting.
Yes,
but we can't do that. What we're doing is working with state governors, state governments, so that they are able to pay for the indigent patients, and those who can afford will be able to pay for the procedure. And then that's part of the evaluation of the patient. Besides that, they also have to have a donor. For our patients, our protocol, we do only children 18 and under. In fact, under 18, because children, as you know, Mary, are less likely to reject a graft. They're less likely to reject a graft. Adults are perhaps already more entrenched in themselves, so they're more likely to reject grafts. So when we talk about graft versus host disease, you're more likely to get it in adults. So we're keeping our protocol really simple, only children. The other one is sibling donors only, brother or sister donor. We don't use father or mother. You're closer to your sibling in your pool of genes than you are to your father and your mother. You're 50% of your father and 50% of your mother. But like I say, we're keeping it really simple. So we use only sibling donors. That way, I'm sure we won't make any mistake. We'll start very simply and we'll run with it.
Okay, so
those are some for selection of patients.
Already we are streamlining. The person has to have a brother or sister. The case has to be bad, and then they have to have enough money. So that is quite a bit of
No, they don't necessarily have to have enough money, Mary. I said we're doing that for them. We'll go to the end of earth to look for money for them.
Okay.
So as long as a candidate is selected, we'll find the money for that candidate.
Okay, so there's something I keep hearing called HLA typing. And I'm wondering, Is it the same as blood typing, genotype? What does that mean?
It's called human leukocyte antigen, big terminology, but it's just simple. It helps us determine who is the best donor for this patient. Even amongst the siblings, there will be a best because they're looking for the best match, 100%. So that's what that does. Human leukocyte antigen typing, big terminology, big name, but keep it simple. We're looking for who is the best donor. That'll give us a 100% match that won't have any problems when it comes to rejecting a graft or having graft versus host disease. So that's what HLA typing is about. And why we say our program is comprehensive. In fact, it's only comprehensive, the first comprehensive sickle cell program and stem cell transplant program for sickle cell in Africa. Because it does contain under one roof everything from the donor evaluation, everything you need for the donor, from donor evaluation to recipient evaluation to management care and post-transplant care as well. Pre-transplant, the entire spectrum, and post-transplant, and including this HLA typing I just spoke about.
Can you tell us what exactly a bone marrow transplant entails? How is it done?
Super. That's a pertinent question because I think I've shared with you that a colleague of mine actually said, who do you have on your team as your surgeon, And I said, surgeon? It's not surgery. Bone marrow transplantation is not surgery. So when you hear transplant, people think, oh, this is a surgical procedure. It is not. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you get your donor. The HLA typing helps you determine who the best donor is in our own protocol. In other climes where you just look at the registry all over the world, there are stem cell registries where you can select donors. So let's focus on ours. You look for the right donor using the HLA typing and then get the donor. The donor too has to be properly evaluated, including counseling of the family and even psychosocial counseling, because you have to know this. The donor has to know what they're doing. Most often, of course, I said it's a sibling, most often is a young person. For our protocol, it's a young person as well, because they're sibling of the patient. So, but you have to carry them along and know that, and let them know what they're in for. And besides the psychosocial aspect, also the physical aspects. They're going to be pain. Is the patient is the donor going to be admitted, and all that? So there's no admission. You draw the marrow, and it's a soft. It's not. You draw the marrow from what we call the iliac crest, the hip bone. You draw it, and the hematologists usually do that, clinicians, under sterile conditions and under anesthesia. So the patient feels no pain. You draw the marrow, bag the marrow, and then go ahead and transfuse. It's given as a transfusion in the vein, in the patient's vein, given as a transfusion. But between the harvesting of the marrow to transfusion in the patient's vein, there's what we call stem cell processing. So it stops at the stem cell processing lab, and that's where you want to be sure that you have the correct quantity and correct quality of stem cells that you require for your patient. That stem cell processing is vital, is the core of this program. And that was one of our limiting step limit. Right now, we have a timeline that we have shifted up to 2 or 3 times. And that's because of this stem cell processing laboratory. There's a major equipment there that helps us process the cells. And the hematologists will tell you that it is absolutely necessary. So when you determine the quality is correct and the quantity is adequate, then you can bag it and then transfuse to the recipient. So it's a transfusion, just like you transfuse, like you see on the screen right now. It's a transfusion. The patient lies down, and the marrow is like blood transfusing to the patient. And the beauty of it, though, is that the patient will have been prepared. There's what we call marrow ablation. That is, you remove the patient's own cells in the bone marrow. The bone marrow is the best source of our stem cells. Like the name implies, stem means that it branches out to other cells that you require. The cells that form our blood cells are found in the bone marrow. They can be found elsewhere, but they're found in the bone marrow, and that's the best stem source. Okay, so once they're transfused and the marrow is prepared, the recipient's marrow, the patient's marrow, is ready to receive the donor marrow. The beauty of it is that it kind of hones the stem cells hone straight into the patient's marrow and begin to populate the marrow. And within 4 weeks, thereabouts, the patient's marrow takes on the new marrow. So in essence, okay, let me go step by, I'm going step by step.
Okay,
so after 4 weeks,
you're making it sound so. Sorry,
okay.
Let me just step in. You're making it sound so,
right.
I mean, almost romantic. But it's a transfusion, but it's also a transplant. And every transplant has its issues. I don't know if this transplant does not have its issues. What could be, the problems involved?
At every step, even the donor may have pain. So you give pain medication and all that. And then even infection may occur. So all those complications that may arise for the donor. But the recipient himself or herself is now in the isolation. Remember that your blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. White blood cells help you fight infection, isn't it? So if by the time you wipe out the bone marrow, you lose your white blood cells that protect you from infection. So you're vulnerable to infections. So that's one of the things that tend to, the big complications to worry about, infection. As I speak to you now, our nurses are still abroad on training. And the main part of their training is infection prevention. The nurses are vital to the success of any bone marrow transplant program. The doctors come do the marrow extraction and harvesting and all that, a lot of the stem cell processing. But the business of ensuring that your patient is alive actually lies in the hands of these nurses. So they take up the patient from the time the patient is in isolation to the time the patient is out of isolation after 30 days. And is now under care, but no longer in isolation, because the patient's marrow is now populated with the cells now. And mind you, at the end goal, if a patient was SS, hemoglobin SS, the patient becomes SAA. Of course, depending on if the donor is AA, we target.
Okay, I've got to cut in there, doctor. We need to go on a break. When we come back, more exciting stuff. Please stay with us, and we'll be with you right after this. Welcome back. We're talking about bone marrow transplantation for sickle cell disorder patients. This is Channels TV, and this is Health Matters. You can call 0808-054-2233 if you have questions about the disorder. You can also tweet at CTV_Mary A, or send me email, moalale@channelstv.com. So, doctor, there's been a lot of preparation. But what I want to ask is, when are you planning to have your very first patients?
Excellent. I think I alluded to that earlier on. There are nurses away, still in training, ensuring that they know everything about infection prevention. And they return in August. So as soon as we have our patients lined up already, they will move straight into the isolation wards. We have 5 isolation rooms. So at any one time, we can have 5 patients on the floor. But we're not starting with 5. We're starting with 1. Then we see how we're going and going to 2. So we're targeting September for the first patient to be admitted. Meanwhile, a lot of evaluation has been going on. Patient donor evaluation, patient evaluation. Evaluation, I tell you, this whole process is long. And that's what I call the forend of the entire process of bone marrow transplantation. The drawing of the marrow and harvesting of the marrow and infusion or transfusion of the marrow into the patient, those tend to be simple. But you need to take care of the forend of the process. It can be as long as 6 months, and that is counseling, genetic counseling, psychosocial counseling, ensuring that the patient knows what they're going in for, besides the patient evaluation that I spoke to you earlier about, and all that takes a long, long time, up to 6 months. So we kind of get the patient ready to go into the isolation room. Everything the patient needs to know. The patient and the family, remember their children, also know what they're going in for. The family understands that the mother usually will be away from home for some time, so to take care of business and all of that. She'll be in the room, in the isolation room with her child for all that period. So all that forend is very important. And then at the end of the day, lets the patient, because I think I've shared with you, Mary, that there was an adult patient who had transplantation in America, I think in his 50s. And they do that there, they have that protocol. But do you know that at the end of the transplantation, he was unhappy? He was now AA. He was unhappy. He said he wanted to go back to his sickle cell body.
Why ever?
Everybody thought that was odd, because now you're AA, you're well, you're not ill in any way, but it was psychological. I feel that, and as cancer tell you, that forend was not adequately taken care of. Because now he said his doctor doesn't call him on Wednesdays anymore. His wife doesn't take care of her as well as much as she used to, and all that. So I think he was feeling, the lack of pampering had reduced.
Yes.
But had he been properly counseled early in that forend, I think he'd be better prepared. But again, it carries on to post-transplant care. Post-transplant care doesn't stop because you've transfused the patient. But apart from taking care of the patient physically, you continue that counseling. You continue that counseling for family, for patient and family, and onwards. Before you discharge them, once they're outpatients, to say bye-bye 18 months after you got all your immunizations, you're fine, you're good to go. Beautiful. The patients usually, when they're children and they were stunted, you see that they catch up within a year and a half with their peers. So physically, they're perfectly fine, but we must pay attention to the psychosocial adjustment in their new bodies, because it's different. They get used to, that. So for years they've lived with, you don't go out in the rain, you turn off your air conditioners. They find themselves doing all those things again and again, and they have to remind themselves, oh, now I don't have a crisis. So, but it's very interesting. But I'm glad to say that at least our Nigerians have this procedure, can access the procedure locally, is available, and as much as possible affordable, because we're trying to help them get funding from state governments. And one thing we must know about bone marrow transplantation is that the patient is cured in himself or herself, but cannot pass the gene to their offspring, because you have not manipulated genes. You have just done bone marrow transplantation. The patient is cured in himself, no crisis, no illness, but can still pass that S gene to his offspring or to her offspring. So that needs to be made clear at the beginning, and that forend of the process.
Okay. Science says one of the ways of harvesting these stem cells could be from the umbilical cord of the sibling. So that brought to mind, blood bank. And I want to ask, do you have any plans going forward of having, well, I don't know what you call it, a blood bank or a stem cell bank, so that in the future, it's not just full siblings that people can get,
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that question. People have also asked that question. I know that our hematologists are also looking at it, but it's like KIV, something we'll keep in view in the horizon. But at the moment, we need to be focused and use the technology that we have now. Umbilical cord is another source of stem cells, excellent source. But bone marrow remains the one that we can readily reach, and which is also good. Remember that some protocols involve just drawing blood from the veins. Well, they call that peripheral blood. You can get bone marrow from peripheral blood, but there's a lot of research that needs to go into how safe that is, how successful bone marrow as stem cell transplantations done using peripheral blood harvesting. So that's still on. I know that there's a center I leave it there. A lot of research needs to be done to study how well patients do who have had stem cells from peripheral blood. Definitely, bone marrow remains the best source that we have at the moment.
Okay.
And the bone transplantation is the cure for sickle cell as we know it today. There are other experimental cures like gene therapy, gene editing.
Okay.
That the patient you don't need a donor. You use the patient's own stem cells.
Okay. In treating a patient, you have spoken, and this was quite the focus on the World Sickle Cell Day, of holistic care,
and
comprehensive care for sickle cell patients.
Exactly.
And you've already mentioned the psychiatrist or psychologist, the hematologist, the nurse. What other people are involved? And will these people still be needed 18 months or 2 years after a bone marrow transplant?
For a patient who has had bone marrow transplantation, a lot of the physical challenges are gone. Because like I said, if a patient was SS, all these problems associated with SS, the crises are gone. The crises are gone. So the patient doesn't have to deal with that. But every so often, you have patients that complain about the issues that are related to psychosocial aspects of their lives, emotional aspects of their lives. So it takes a while, but you must keep them under your wings and have them in, you cannot discharge them completely from your clinic. We say post-transplant clinics, after 18 months, they can go home. No, they're home, mind you. They don't need to return for clinics, post-transplant clinic care. But you need to keep reminding them, come back 6 months, come back annually, and so on. But physically, they're well.
Dr. Akishete, this has been a pleasure, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. See you some other time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Also, you there at home, you there by your computer, you there with your phone watching this program. It's been a pleasure bringing this to you. Have a wonderful day. I am Mary Alale Yusuf.